Canto 33, Circle 9, Cocytus, Compound Fraud. Round 2, Antenora, the treacherous to country. Round 3, Ptolomea, the treacherous to guests and hosts. In reply to Dante's exhortation, the sinner who is gnawing his companion's head looks up, wipes his bloody mouth on his victim's hair, and tells his harrowing story. He is Count Ugolino, and the wretch he gnaws is Archbishop Ruggieri. Both are in Antenora for treason. In life they had once plotted together. Then Ruggieri betrayed his fellow plotter and caused his death by starvation, along with his 4 sons. In the most pathetic and dramatic passage of the Inferno, Ugolino details how their prison was sealed and how his sons dropped dead before him one by one, weeping for food. His terrible tale serves only to renew his grief and hatred, and he has hardly finished it before he begins to gnaw Ruggieri again with renewed fury. In the immutable law of hell, the killer by starvation becomes the food of his victim. The poets leave Ugolino and enter Ptolomea, so named for the Ptolemaeus of Maccabees, who murdered his father-in-law at a banquet. Here are punished those who were treacherous against the ties of hospitality. They lie with only half their faces above the ice, and their tears freeze in their eye sockets, sealing them with little crystal visors. Thus even the comfort of tears is denied them. Here Dante finds Friar Alberigo and Branca Doria, and discovers the terrible power of Ptolomea. So great is its sin that the souls of the guilty fall to its torments even before they die, leaving their bodies still on earth, inhabited by demons. The sinner raised his mouth from his grim repast and wiped it on the hair of the bloody head whose nape he had all but eaten away. At last he began to speak. "You ask me to renew a grief so desperate that the very thought of speaking of it tears my heart in two. But if my words may be a seed that bears the fruit of infamy for him I gnaw, I shall weep, but tell my story through my tears. Who you may be, and by what powers you reach into this underworld, I cannot guess, but you seem to be to me a Florentine by your speech. I was Count Ugolino. I must explain. This reverend grace is the Archbishop Ruggieri. Now I will tell you why I gnaw his brain. That I, who entrusted him, had to undergo imprisonment and death through his treachery, you will know already. What you cannot know, that is the lingering inhumanity of the death I suffered, you shall hear in full. Then judge for yourself if he has injured me. A narrow window in that coop of stone now called the Tower of Hunger for my sake, within which others yet must pace alone, had shown me several waning moons already between its bars, when I slept the evil sleep in which the veil of the future parted for me. This beast appeared as a master of a hunt, chasing the wolf and his whelps across the mountain that hides Lucca from Pisa. Out in front of the starved and shrewd and avid pack he had placed Gualdandi and Sismondi and Lanfranchi to point his prey. The father and sons had raced a brief course, only when they failed of breath and seemed to weaken. Then I thought I saw their flanks ripped open by the hound's fierce teeth. Before the dawn, the dream still in my head, I woke and heard my sons, who were there with me, cry from their troubled sleep, asking for bread. You are cruelty itself if you can keep your tears back at the thought of what foreboding stirred in my heart, and if you do not weep, at what are you used to weeping? The hour when food used to be brought drew near. They were now awake, and each was anxious from his dream's dark mood. And from the base of that horrible tower I heard the sound of hammers nailing up the gates. I stared at my sons' faces without a word. I did not weep. I had turned stone inside. They wept. What ails you, father? You look so strange. My little Anselm, youngest of them, cried. But I did not speak a word nor shed a tear. Not all that day nor all that endless night, until I saw another son appear. When a tiny ray leaked into that dark prison, and I saw staring back from their 4 faces the terror and the wasting of my own, I bit my hands in helpless grief, and they, thinking I chewed myself for hunger, rose suddenly together. I heard them say, "Father, it would give us much less pain if you ate us. It was you who put upon us this sorry flesh. Now strip it off again." I calmed myself to spare them. Ah, hard earth, why did you not yawn open? All that day and the next we sat in silence. On the fourth, Gado, the eldest, fell before me and cried, stretched at my feet upon the prison floor, Father, why don't you help me? There he died, and just as you see me, I saw them fall one by one. On the fifth day and the sixth, then already blind, I began to crawl from body to body, shaking them frantically. 2 days I called their names, and they were dead. Then fasting overcame my grief and me. His eyes narrowed to slits when he was done, and he seized the skull again between his teeth, grinding it as a mastiff grinds a bone. Ah, Pisa, foulest blemish on the land, where sea sounds sweet and clear, since those near by you are slow to blast the ground on which you stand, may Caprara and Gorgona drift from place, and dam the flooding Arno at its mouth until it drowns the last of your foul race. For if to Ugolino falls the censure for having betrayed your castles, you, for your part, should not have put his sons to such a torture. You modern Thebes, those tender lives you spilt, Brigata, Uguccione, and the others I mentioned earlier, were too young for guilt. We passed on further, where the frozen mine entombs another crew in greater pain. These wraiths are not bent over, but lie supine. Their very weeping closes up their eyes, and the grief that finds no outlet for its tears turns inward to increase their agonies. For the first tears that they shed not instantly in their eye sockets, and as they freeze they form a crystal visor above the cavity. And despite the fact that standing in that place I had become as numb as any callus, and all sensation had faded from my face, somehow I felt a wind begin to blow, whereat I said, Master, what stirs this wind? Is not all heat extinguished here below? And the master said to me, Soon you will be where your own eyes will see the source and cause and give you their own answer to the mystery. And one of those locked in that icy maw cried out to us as we passed, O soul so cruel that you are sent to the last post of all, relieve me for a little from the pain of this hard veil. Let my heart weep again a while before the weeping frees my eyes again. And I to him, If you would have my service, tell me your name. Then, if I do not help you, may I descend to the last rim of the ice. I am Friar Alberigo, he answered, therefore, the same who called for the fruits from the bad garden. Here I'm given dates for figs full store. What? Are you dead already? I said to him, and he then, How my body stands in the world I do not know. So privileged is this rim of Ptolomea that often souls fall to it before dark Atropos has cut their thread. And that you may more willingly free my spirit of this glaze of frozen tears that shrouds my face, I will tell you this. When a soul betrays as I did, it falls from flesh, and a demon takes its place, ruling the body till its time is spent. The ruined soul rains down into this cistern. So I believe there is still evident in the world above all that is fair and mortal of this black shade who winters here behind me. If you have only recently crossed the portal from that sweet world, you surely must have known his body. Branca Doria is its name, and many years have passed since he rained down. I think you are trying to take me in, I said. Sir Branca Doria is a living man. He eats, he drinks, he fills his clothes and his bed. Michel Zanca had not yet reached the ditch of the black talons, the frozen wraith replied. There were the sinners, thick and in hot pitch, when this one left his body to a devil, as did his nephew, and second in treachery, and plumbed like lead through space to this dead level. But now reach out your hand and let me cry. And I did not keep the promise I had made, for to be rude to him was courtesy. Ah, men of Genoa, souls of little worth, corrupted from all custom of righteousness, why have you not been driven from the earth? From there, beside the blackest soul of all Romagna's evil plain, lies one of yours, bathing his filthy soul in the eternal glacier of Cocytus for his foul crime, while he seems yet alive in world and time. 1 to 90, Ugolino and Ruggieri. Ugolino Count of Donoratico and a member of the Guelph family della Garadesca, he and his nephew Nino de Visconti led the two Guelph factions of Pisa. In 1288, Ugolino, intrigued with Archbishop Ruggieri degli Ubaldini, leader of the Ghibellines, to get rid of Visconti and to take over the command of all the Pisan Guelphs. The plan worked, but in the consequent weakening of the Guelphs, Ruggieri saw his chance and betrayed Ugolino, throwing him into prison with his sons and his grandsons. In the following year, the prison was sealed up, and they were left to starve to death. The law of retribution is clearly evident. In life, Ruggieri sinned against Ugolino by denying him food. In hell, he himself becomes food for his victim. 18. You will know already. News of Ugolino's imprisonment and death would certainly have reached Florence. What you cannot know, no living man could know what happened after Ugolino and his sons were sealed in the prison and abandoned. 22. Coup. Dante uses the word muda in Italian, signifying a stone tower in which falcons were kept in the dark to molt. From the time of Ugolino's death, it became known as the Tower of Hunger. 25. Several waning moons. Ugolino was jailed late in 1288. He was sealed in to starve early in 1289. 28. This beast, Ruggieri. 29 and 30. The mountain that hides Lucca from Pisa. These two cities would be in view of one another were it not for Mont San Giuliano. 32. Gualandi and Sismondi and Lanfranchi. Three Pisan nobles, Ghibellines and friends of the Archbishop. 51 to 71. Ugolino's sons. Actually, two of the boys were grandsons, and all were considerably older than one would gather from Dante's account. Anselm, the youngest grandson, was 15. The others were really young men, and were certainly old enough for guilt, despite Dante's charge in line 90. 75. Then fasting overcame my grief and me. He died. Some interpret the line to mean that Ugolino's hunger drove him to cannibalism. Ugolino's present occupation in hell would certainly support that interpretation, but the fact is that cannibalism is the one major sin Dante does not assign a place to in hell. So monstrous would it have seemed to him that he must certainly have established a special punishment for it. Certainly he could hardly have relegated it to an ambiguity. Moreover, it would be a sin of bestiality rather than of fraud, and as such, it would be punished in the seventh circle. 79 to 80. The land where sea sounds sweet and clear, Italy. 82. Caprara and Gorgona. These two islands near the mouth of the Arno were Pisan possessions in 1300. 86. Betrayed your castles. In 1284, Ugolino gave up certain castles to Lucca and Florence. He was at war with Genoa at the time, and it is quite likely that he ceded the castles to buy the neutrality of these two cities, for they were technically allied with Genoa. Dante, however, must certainly consider the action as treasonable, for otherwise Ugolino would be in Cana for his treachery to Visconti. 88. You modern thieves. Thebes, as a number of the foregoing notes will already have made clear, was the site of some of the most hideous crimes of antiquity. 91, we passed on further, marks the passage into Ptolomea. 105, is not all heat extinguished? Dante believed, rather accurately by chance, that all winds resulted from exhalations of heat. Cocytus, however, is conceived as wholly devoid of heat, a metaphysical absolute zero. The source of the wind, as we discover in the next canto, is Satan himself. 117, may I descend to the last rim of the ice? Dante is not taking any chances. He has to go on to the last rim in any case. The sinner, however, believes him to be another damned soul and would interpret the oath quite otherwise than as Dante meant it. Friar Alberigo of the Manfredi of Faenza. He was another jovial friar. In 1284, his brother Manfred struck him in the course of an argument. Alberigo pretended to let it pass, but in 1285 he invited Manfred and his sons to a banquet and had them murdered. The signal to the assassins was the words, "Bring in the fruit." Friar Alberigo's bad fruit became a proverbial saying. 125, Atropos, the fate who cuts the thread of life. 137, Branca, Doria, a Genoese Ghibelline. His sin is identical in kind to that of Friar Alberigo. In 1275, he invited his father-in-law, Michael Zanchi, to a banquet and had him and his companions cut to pieces. He was assisted in the butchery by his nephew.